Oh, the
the
tunnel.
computer speaker off though.
Yeah. You have to turn off your computer speaker.
Oh, the computer one?
Right, exactly. Just turn it off on the PC.
Ah, yes. Morning, Senator.
There.
Ah, good morning, Senator.
Uh-huh.
Little Jimi Hendrix action there.
Now we don't hear you at all, Cynthia. Your phone number is gone. So I don't know if you hung up.
My phone number.
Want to try calling back in?
Okay, so folks, we are streaming and we're recording now since it's 9:04, just to be safe.
That's your phone number? No, what did it say?
Right. We understand that it's echo, but that's because you have two devices that are close together. If you have to turn off the speaker on your
PC.
PC, then you should be able to use your phone to speak. In just a moment.
Oh, I'm seeing dialogue going back and forth between all the IT people. And I think what happened is we were all sent the link for attendees. Is that the problem as opposed to for panelists? Is there a different link?
No, I think Faye sent a link yesterday. I'm using that.
Okay,
Right, I did too.
Okay, Board Member Peralta, I think you still have the echo. Make sure your PC is
Still. And I put it about a foot away.
you've gotta mute.
Are you not able to turn off your?
Oh, wait, you're unmuted on your, let me mute you. No, I can't mute you. You have to mute yourself.
I did.
You're
I
unmuted.
muted myself.
You're showing as unmuted.
My screen is showing muted.
Okay, but even though you're muted, your speaker is still on and it's causing a problem with the two devices.
Turn your volume all the way down on your speakers.
If she does that, can she hear?
On her phone, which is
Yeah.
what you're trying to do.
I'm turning off all my speakers on my laptop and I show muted. And then before it was asking me to reboot. You want me to start all over? That was a question.
What do you think, Paul? Should she try again? I mean,
Sure, it's up to you. Cynthia,
I'll try.
on all night?
Say that again, Paul?
Was your PC on all night? No?
No. No, it's a laptop. My desktop died on me.
Okay, so you just turned your PC on brand new this morning? Your laptop?
What do you mean brand new?
You just fired it up brand new this morning. It wasn't on overnight.
like it
Correct.
wasn't sleeping or anything, it was off.
I get rid of that.
There was one
I'm
instance
gonna-
when my wife was doing Zoom, had the same problem. I had to turn it off and turn back on. It was fine after that. So
All right,
sometimes there's
let's
something.
try that one more time then.
Right.
Now, you guys can hear me, right?
Now,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I've totally turned it off, and I'm gonna try to reboot, but I'm gonna leave you on the line until I know that you guys can hear me. I'm just gonna completely get out of Zoom. I haven't had this particular problem before.
This morning is a morning for new problems. In the ever-changing world. of-
Apparently. Okay. Okay, I can see you guys.
All right, she's in
But I don't see
attendee,
me.
Paul. I don't know if you want to try to take her from there.
well, maybe if you, can you hear us through your PC now? And do you want to turn off the phone or not?
Other than the echo, does it echo on your side?
Yes.
Why don't you try muting your phone for a moment? Let's see what happens there. You can take your smartphone and just
Mute or just turn it
see what happens there.
down?
Either way.
What is that?
Cynthia, try unmuting your, yeah, there you go. What? Can you talk?
Can you hear me?
Yes, okay,
yeah.
now we hear you.
Now you just can't see me.
Yeah, just turn on your video. Now we see you.
Okay, so,
Perfect.
Yeah.
okay.
Wonderful. Okay. We're all settled in then. Okay, then we're going to open up the hearing for today. It is July 7th, 2020. The time is now 9:10 a.m. and we are meeting remotely via Zoom due to the stay in place orders still in the state of California due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this morning we have 2 items on the calendar, and we need to begin with an item which I will hand over to the clerk of the board, Ms. Thomas, which is our annual election of our hearing board chair and of our hearing board vice chair. So before we begin our hearing, and then we have 1 hearing on the agenda for today, but I will turn it over to Ms. Thomas.
Hello,
Oh, she is
was that calendar
muted.
idea? Was that listed on the calendar for events today?
I'm sorry, that is on the calendar for today.
It's listed. I didn't see it, but that's okay. Carry on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. At this time, I will open the floor for nominations for chair.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and nominate Ms. Pruzak for the chair.
Second,
Are there any further nominations? Hearing none, I will close the floor to further nominations. All those in favor of Ms. Prusak for chair, say aye.
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 Those opposed, say no. Hearing none, the ayes have it, and Julie Prusak is elected chair.
Thank you.
I will now open the floor for nominations for vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Boglapalan.
I'll second that if we need a second.
Are there any further nominations? Hearing no further nominations, I will close the floor All those in favor of Mr. Balakopalan for vice chair, say aye.
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 Those opposed, say no. Hearing none, the ayes have it, and Mr. Balakopalan is elected vice chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Congratulations.
Okay,
Thank
and thank you,
Everybody.
my fellow board members. Let's move forward then with our hearing, since we have very patiently waiting parties. The one hearing we have on the calendar today is SCAQMD versus the County of San Bernardino for a stipulated order for abatement. And, excuse me, who is representing the executive officer this morning?
Good morning, Catherine Roberts on behalf of the executive officer.
Good morning, Ms. Roberts. And who is representing San Bernardino County this morning?
Ron Lindsay, I'm the Director of Fleet Management for the county.
Good morning, Mr. Lindsay. Okay, we only have one, I believe we only have one document which was filed, but I still think, given that it's a proposed findings and decision, that we should mark it. So let's mark the proposed findings and decision for an order for abatement stipulated that was filed with the clerk of the board on June 24th, 2020. And we're going to mark that as Exhibit 1 for the district. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Roberts for your opening statement.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. First, I would like to be the first to congratulate both Ms. Prusak and Mr. Balakopalan on their re-election as chair and vice chair. We appreciate your service a great deal as part of the district. So firstly, this matter is a stipulated order for abatement regarding the respondent San Bernardino County's compliance with South Coast AQMD Rule 1196. Rule 1196 is known by the district colloquially as one of our fleet rules. This regulates heavy-duty fleets of public entities. As this is not a rule that is regularly heard by the hearing board in matters either for order for abatement or for variances, the district has this morning as its witness a program supervisor, Mr. Brian Cho, who will testify not only to the respondent's fleet, but also help walk through the main provisions of the rule, particularly those provisions that are going to be most applicable to the respondent's fleet and this order. In this case, generally, the County of San Bernardino does maintain a heavy-duty fleet which is subject to the rule. Beginning in late 2018, the county actually self-reported its non-compliance to the district and district staff. And since that time, since late 2018, the parties, both the district and the county, have been working diligently together to both fully investigate the scope and scale of Rule 1196 applicability, and then to negotiate a plan to bring the County of San Bernardino into full compliance with District Rule 1196. The result of those efforts are memorialized in the stipulated proposed findings that has been entered as Exhibit Number 1. That Exhibit Number 1, the proposed stipulation, lays out principally a schedule. It is listed as Attachment A to that exhibit. That schedule for compliance, I do want to address briefly. It spans roughly 3.5 years. Under most district rules and under most fact scenarios that come before this board, 3.5 years for compliance is a very, very long schedule. However, this is a reasonable approach given the nature of the district's fleet rules. The nature of these rules firstly involves regulating a fleet rather than a singular piece of equipment, a single vehicle at a time. So it often requires the replacement of multiple vehicles within a fleet. Secondly, I do want to note that this rule, Rule 1196, is specifically looking at heavy duty vehicles, which are not the typical passenger car vehicles that can be instantly procured by going down to your local car dealership. These are oftentimes customized. These are oftentimes can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for replacement. And so they require a good deal of lead time, both in budgeting and actual procurement in order to replace. And then lastly, I do want to note that this schedule does require the replacement of vehicles that will cost the county up to almost $1.5 million over the course of this order. All of that is coming out of publicly funded budgets, as this rule only regulates public entities. However, over the course of this proposed order, the respondent is going to replace 5 diesel trucks with cleaner alternative fueled compressed natural gas or CNG vehicles. And an additional 19 vehicles are going to be redeployed by the county's fleet management department, such that they will be outside of the South Coast AQMD, which does recognize that the county of San Bernardino does span, has a jurisdiction that encompasses areas both within and outside of the South Coast AQMD jurisdiction and extends into other air districts. And so lastly, during the course of this 3.5-year order, this proposed order does include a fairly rigorous notice, reporting, and status hearing requirements that will allow this board to ensure the milestones are being maintained during the course of this order. And based on all of the facts that are in those proposed findings and the testimony that you'll receive this morning, there is good cause for the board to enter this order as stipulated to by the parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Mr. Lindsay, your opening statement, please.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Ron Lindsay. I am the Director of Fleet Management for the County of San Bernardino. With me today, I have Lauren Finwall, our Regulatory Compliance Specialist, and Craig Donovan, our Fleet Superintendent. As Catherine said, the order for abatement before you is the result of a lot of collaboration between the district and the county. And I'll give you some brief background on our side. About 2.5 years ago, Lauren and I both were hired on into the county in our respective positions. Once we got settled, one of the first things we did was an audit of our on-road heavy-duty diesel vehicles that were operating in the district for compliance with 1196. We found several vehicles that appeared to be non-compliant. We researched, determined that yes, indeed, there were some vehicles that were non-compliant with that rule. So Lauren and I immediately took a couple of steps to start this process. We modified the procurement process for the county as such to where this type of mistake will not happen again. And then we took the vehicles that we determined to be non-compliant, put together a draft action plan, a corrective plan, and then we went to the district, self-reported, presented our plan, and since then we've been in negotiation, as Catherine said, to come up with the order for abatement that's before you. That concludes my opening statement.
Thank you. Before I turn it to Ms. Roberts for your witness, I want to swear in the witnesses, please. Those who wish to testify today, and if there's any member of the public who are present and wish to give comments later, please raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Just indicate. Okay.
I do.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Roberts, you may introduce your witness.
Thank you. The district would like to call Mr. Brian Cho. Mr. Cho, can you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Yes, my name is Brian Cho, spelled B-R-I-A-N, Cho, C-H-O-E.
Thank you. And what is your position with the South Coast AQMD?
I'm program supervisor in planning division, overseeing the mobile source fleet rules team.
And you did take the oath this morning?
Yes.
Thank you. Can you briefly explain what your role entails with respect to the fleet rules?
Yes, as a program supervisor, as well as my staff in the fleet rules section, we oversee the both development as well as the implementation of fleet rules, which applies to the public entities as well as the private contractors that provide services to these private entities.
So turning to Rule 1196, what does that rule require for public entities with respect to heavy-duty vehicles?
Okay, first, the rule applies to public entities that with 15 or more heavy-duty vehicles with gross vehicle weight rating of 14,000 pounds. So the gross vehicle weight rating is more of a total operating weight of a vehicle. And if you have 14,000 or greater in the GVWR, those will be subject to 1196. So for those entities with 15 or more, they are required to purchase or lease when you add or replace their existing fleet vehicles with a qualifying compliant vehicles. Those are either gasoline vehicles or the alternative fuel, including the CNG and LNG vehicle or the dual fuel vehicles.
Okay, so in general, it can be gasoline, it can be dual fueled, or it could be this alternative fuel. Generally, it does not permit diesel fueled vehicles. Is that correct?
That's correct, unless it is either exempt or that's actually basically granted an approval under what we call TICR process or technical infeasibility certification request process.
Okay. And so I do want to walk through a little bit about the exemptions of Rule 1196 that are included as part of this rule in subsection F. Do you have the rule in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Okay, can you explain the exemption that's listed in subsection F8A? That's on page 5 of the rule. Can you briefly explain to us what that exemption is?
Yeah, the exemption clause under the F8A applies to fleets with 15 to 100 the fleet vehicles in their fleet. And for those fleets with basically the number of vehicles, they are allowed to keep or maintain up to 3 non-compliant vehicles in their fleet. So meaning mostly these are diesel vehicles they need to have for the operational needs or for whatever the reason that may be, they are allowed under the provision to keep up to 3.
Okay, and staying in that same subsection F, but on the next page of the rule on page 6, there's an exemption in F10. Can you briefly explain what that exemption does?
Yes, that exemption applies to basically the public entities with jurisdictions that expands outside AQMD's jurisdiction, just like the San Bernardino or maybe even Riverside, so for those entities with the jurisdictions expands outside the AQMDs, if they all have to, they are basically have vehicles that they need to operate, but they can keep them outside the jurisdiction for at least more than 880 days per year, and those vehicles will be considered exempt under the provision.
So to be exempt under this F10 for the applicable public entities, do you have to just not operate the vehicle inside the district, or does it require more with respect to where the vehicle is located?
Yeah, it is not just limited to operation, but it is also how, where it's stored and garaged. So for more than at least 180 days or more, they have to be basically kept outside the district and also operate outside the district.
Okay, and I believe you did note this, but the county of San Bernardino has some portion of it that is within the South Coast AQMD jurisdiction. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the what we call non-desert portion of the San Bernardino is inside our jurisdiction.
But the county does include parts that are outside. That's correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And in your work as part of the fleet rules, did you become familiar with respondent San Bernardino County's heavy duty fleet?
Yes, as Mr. Lindsay explained earlier as part of the background, Mr. Lindsay reached out to us back in November of 2018 just to discuss non-compliance issues with their fleet based on their self-audit. So we met in December of 2018 with district staff and Mr. Lindsay and Lauren Finwell in a meeting at the district to discuss first basically what are the possible vehicles that could be considered as, non-compliant under the 1196, and that, basically how to proceed in terms of correcting those and then remediate those non-compliance issues.
Great. And as part of that, working on this, are you familiar with the findings and decisions that was submitted and has been entered as Exhibit 1 in this matter?
Yes, I am.
And do you have a copy of those in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Can you turn to page 3 of that document and looking at paragraph number 7? That indicates the county currently has 47 heavy-duty vehicles in its fleet. Is that correct?
Yes, so based on the information that's provided by San Bernardino County, that is correct.
And of those 47 vehicles, how many were determined to be out of compliance with Rule 1196?
There are a total of 27 heavy-duty diesel vehicles were considered non-compliant at the moment.
And those 27 non-compliant vehicles are itemized in attachment 1 to the exhibit of the findings and decision. Is that correct?
Yes, it's under attachment A, yes.
Attachment A, sorry. Thank you. So I do want to look at that attachment and kind of have you walk us through it a little bit. In that attachment, in the second to last column from the right, the vehicles are grouped into 3 different categories. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And those categories are Category 1, Category 2, Category 3.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay, and so going back up to the findings and decision, at the bottom of page 4, the proposed order lays out the compliance path for each category. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And so what is required under the proposed order number 1A for vehicles listed in Category 1?
So for Category 1, these vehicles shall be redeployed so that they will be garage housed, parked, stored, or operated within the South Coast AQMD's jurisdiction shall not basically operate a garage for more than 180 days per calendar year, beginning with the calendar year 2020.
So for those vehicles in Category 1, once they meet this condition, those vehicles would meet the exemption in Rule 1196 F10. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that basically we will be making sure that those vehicles will be kept out of the jurisdiction for more than 880 days every year.
Okay. And so looking at the proposed order number 1B, what is required for vehicles in Category 2?
These are the vehicles that will be replaced within the next 3.5-year time frame with a CNG vehicle.
And so when that proposed order refers to a Rule 1196 compliant CNG vehicle, that means it meets the rule's definition for an alternative fuel vehicle. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And what is required of the Category 3 vehicles?
Category 3 are the 3 vehicles that will be eligible for exemption under the F8A. So these vehicles will be basically maintained by the San Bernardino as an exempt vehicle.
Okay. And so looking beyond that condition number 1, the proposed order contains additional requirements, including notice and reporting under conditions 2 and 3. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And I specifically want to look at condition number 2 with respect to vehicles in Category number 1, those that were going to be redeployed. What specific information is going to be reported on those vehicles under condition number 2?
So basically, in order to ensure that these vehicles are, basically kept outside our jurisdictions for at least half a year or 680 days, the reports will include the evidence of the fact that they were operated in a house outside of our jurisdictions. with the GPS informations and activity data.
Okay, and so that would allow the district to essentially verify that condition number 1A is being met. Is that correct?
That is the plan. Yes, that's correct.
And so when you and your group were preparing and reviewing this proposed compliance plan, did you calculate the excess emissions that would that are expected from the lifetime of this order?
Yes, we have.
And I believe that those are reported on page 4, paragraph number 16 of the proposed order as 0.561 tons of NOx or oxides of nitrogen. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And 0.008 ton of particulate matter. Is that correct?
Yes.
And to be clear, that is over the lifetime of the order or over the next approximately 3.5 years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. That's all my questions on direct for Mr. Cho.
Thank you, Mr. Cho. Board members, any questions for Mr. Cho that were not answered? Ms. Verdugo Peralta, unmute you. Oh, you have to unmute yourself, I believe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having worked on the fleet rules when I was on the governing board, and they were hard-fought fleet rules, I'm curious as to why there was 16 years between the time that the fleet rules came into effect and the point at which San Bernardino self-reported. Was there any oversight during those 16 years from the district at all?
Since I joined the group in 2018, so I don't really have a clear understanding of type of enforcement or activities that basically took place prior to my coming to the group. And based on my understandings, occasionally we'll send out a survey, number one, to get an understanding of type of vehicles and number of vehicles each entities are operating under the fleet rule provision. And in fact, when I joined the group in 2018, we did conducted such a survey, and we collected the information. So in terms of enforcement activities, as far as I know, there's some activities going on, but maybe not as rigorous as we'd like it to be. That's just simply my observational opinion. And under the rule, which does not require actually more of an annual or some sort of a mandatory reporting of their vehicle status to AQMD, that's something that we'll probably be considering to update in the next when we are amending those fleet rules in the next phase.
So that's from the point forward of which San Bernardino reported it themselves. I just think it's unfortunate that all of that time they could have been worked with and could have come into compliance sooner. I support the fact that they are doing it now and commend them for coming to the AQMD. And for that reason, I agree that I do see just cause, but it just bothers me that all of that time that they could have come into compliance, we've lost all of that amount of emissions that could have been saved. So,
Jim, any other questions?
No.
Yes, Ms. Bruzak.
Okay, so I'll turn it to Mr. Balagopalan.
Who's going, me? I'm sorry. I know we went direct to the board members. What about if Ms. Lindsay had some questions?
It's been a while, sorry. Mr. Lindsay, I skipped right over you. Thank you, Mr. Balagopalan. Do you have
And then I'll ask my question after he's done.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Cho?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Balagopalan, for the reminder.
Okay, I have some questions I can for Mr. Cho. Okay, Mr. Chair, I want to bring, had some questions on the rule and
Yes.
on the conditions.
Okay.
And looking at the rule F8A, that exemption for the 3 vehicles that do not meet the requirements of rule, the last sentence said they should be equipped with approved control devices. Do you know what kind of control devices those 3 have?
Yeah. These are the control devices to control PM emissions. It's what we call diesel particulate filters. And all the vehicles, it's actually a state law that all these vehicles now, they should be equipped with the DPFs. So, and these vehicle, my understanding is equipped with DPF, which is state approved control device.
Thank you. For clarification, though the rule was adopted in October 2000, so it's any vehicle that they purchase subsequent to that date is what they're out of compliance with. So the 27 vehicles were purchased after that date, and that's why they're not in compliance, basically.
The effective date under the rule is July of 2002.
Oh, 2000, okay.
Yes, rule was adopted in 2000, but the effective date was July of 2002. So any non-compliant vehicles purchased without prior approval from AQMD under the TICR process will be considered, if they are non-compliant, they will be considered, basically not in compliance with 1196.
That's why only 27 out of the 47 are not in compliance.
No, my understanding is the remaining vehicles are mostly already meeting the 1196, being natural gas vehicles.
Oh, I see. Okay. The other question I have is on F10.
Yes.
Now, the 180 days, just for clarification, it's not consecutive days. They could be in and out as long as the total is 180 days, correct?
Correct. These vehicles have to operate less than 180 days inside our jurisdiction collectively. Okay. So cumulatively within one single calendar year, yes.
So is the assumption for this year that they were all operated within the South Coast, and that's why they have to be redeployed?
Because these vehicles, were probably, my understanding is, number one, many of these vehicles are more of a seasonally operated vehicle as a snowplower inside the district. So, but they have more than that. But these vehicles only operated during the winter season or spring season when they're needed as a snowplowers, and then during the off seasons, so to speak, they'll take the snow plowers off the truck, so they'll use it as a dump truck, and they'll maintain operations and storage outside the district during the off season, so that they'll be able to meet the 180 days requirement. And that is my understanding. If maybe Mr. Lindsay can correct me if I'm wrong.
So have they provided data showing the GPS data, and has that been mapped to show where they operated during the last 6 months?
As I said, we haven't got the GPS data yet, but that would be the requirement. But more importantly, we understood, and based on the operational needs, they don't need to operate these snow plowers inside, basic South Coast Air Basin during the off season for the ski season. So beyond the April of each year, they can definitely move them out of the district and use them as a dump truck, and making sure these vehicles are kept outside using GPS location data, which they'll provide on an annual report to us.
So what happens in the winter, December, late November, December, with snowfall, and if they have to bring that in, will they be out of compliance?
No, because they'll be collectively, as long as they're operating less than 180 days total per each vehicle within 12-month period. And based on our understanding and the information so far they have provided, they usually operated from like November to April maximum, so less than 6 months.
But that'll be verified with the date, the GPS data.
Yeah, going forward, they'll be required to provide the GPS data to us with in the annual reports that we can verify them, and we'll have it on record.
And when you say you verify them, what is the proposal? How do you plan to verify that data you get? And we're talking about, well, I know you haven't got the GPS data, but that'll be if it's on every day or however and I'll ask Mr. Lindsay on that, but there's a lot of data collected.
Right.
And the follow-up question is, how do they know, or the district knows when they enter the district, because the district boundary is it's a virtual boundary, it's not, and so how do they know when they cross in or out of the district boundary? Jurisdiction, basically.
I think I saw that Mr. Lindsay raising his hand, so maybe I can defer that to.
We'll wait until, I saw Mr. Lindsay took the oath, but let's wait until he
Okay.
his testimony.
Okay. Well, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, Senator, you had questions and you were next. If you can unmute yourself. Looks like you're momentarily unmuting and then mute. There you go.
Sir, Mr. Cho,
Yes.
in paragraph 15, page 4, you discussed that you're negotiating with the county of San Bernardino to determine what should be done in order to become in compliance. Correct?
Correct.
You have a target date for compliance? Or is that just part of your negotiation?
Can you, I didn't hear the first part. Can you repeat that question?
Do you have an estimated or target date for the county to be in compliance?
Yes, based on, as stipulated in the order, the target date is the end of 2023. When, in terms of at least replacing the 5 vehicles. Now, for the vehicle that will be operated outside of the district for more than 180 days per year, will maintain the compliance based on the annual reports and the GPS information that will provide to us every year.
In order to establish some kind of compliance date, we look at, there's a determining factor, for an example. On paragraph 13, line 28, where there's $5.3 million has been set aside for compliance. Is that correct?
That's the sort of annual budget that I understand that they operate with.
Right. So you have a vehicle would cost $130,000 to $370,000. You think that whatever they budgeted for is sufficient in order to acquire the vehicles to meet your compliance?
Yeah, I think that based on the annual budgets they have, I think they should have sufficient budget to replace all 5 within the time that we have worked out with.
The key word is they should have. Do you have any assurance that's going to happen? Or you speculate that it would happen?
If you're saying, I guess questioning whether the San Bernardino should have replaced all of them in 21, is that what?
Is the money that they appropriated sufficient to meet the minimum requirements for compliance, to your knowledge?
Yes, I mean this. They have budgeted sufficient. The reason that the plan is to replace them in the time schedule they have is not just strictly on the budget, whether they had enough budget to replace them all in the first year. Is that if you look at the model year of the 2 vehicles they'll be replacing in 2023 are relatively new vehicle. So also we had to keep that in mind, since they just purchased it in 2015. They want to maintain those vehicles a couple of years longer so that to get more mileage and use out of the vehicle before they actually replace them with brand new CNG vehicles.
So you will waive the right to allow them to use vehicles that's out of compliance because they just acquired them recently.
As part of the negotiation we have done is we try to expedite the replacement schedules, truncate it down. Initially, just give it background. It started from about 5 years window. And then as you can see, and it was more staggered, like one per each year type of arrangement. So we kind of brought it forward so that at least 3 of them would be replaced in 21. And then those are the dirtier vehicles, older model years.
How many vehicles they acquired recently that you would say? Time frame that you just discussed.
If you look at the attachment A, they have relatively newer model years, about in the latest model year that I see on the list is model year 2018 for one of the vehicles that are that will be maintained as an exempt vehicle.
What about model in the year 2017 or 2016? How are you consider that?
Just for your information, if you look at attachment,
I know, I see the prime.
it's the second, the year of the model of each of the vehicles is the second column in.
Right.
Okay, but are they've been relocated, those vehicles. So there's no consideration for the compliance date as relates to those vehicles.
If you look at the second to last column category, all the category 1, which go down to number 19.
And 19 of them, yes.
Those are the ones that are being relocated. The categories 2, which go from 20 to 24, those are in category 2. Those are the replacement. And then the last 3, which are category 3 on that column, those are the ones that are indicated as being exempt, the 3 that are exempt.
Okay, thank you. No more further questions.
I have just 2 questions. So do you know, I noticed that in looking at this attachment A, that the 3 that are chosen to be exempt are 2018, 2017, and 2015 models. Do you know if there was consideration of the fact that these are newer, cleaner models in making them exempt?
That's part of it, but it's also, it is up to San Bernardino to identify which vehicles they need to keep as an essential service vehicles. And my understanding is these are like not just like a dump truck. Most of them are, a couple of them are actually specialty vehicles, which requires a custom body and equipment that needs to be also installed. So it costs more than, let's say, flatbed or the dump trucks to begin with. And considering that these are newer model years and they need to maintain these vehicles to service their areas, we agreed that we had no objection for them to keep them as an exempt vehicle.
And do the later model, thank you, do the later model years of these vehicles help you to determine that they actually have the particulate DPF, the filters in it?
Yes, they are, by state law, they are all sold with DPFs for later model years. And also these are cleaner diesel vehicles. So compared to like 2009-10, these are far cleaner vehicles. So we feel more comfortable keeping, for San Bernardino to keep much newer vehicles as an exempt vehicle rather than like 2009-10 vehicles. Yes.
And then the only other question I had is, do you have any knowledge of whether, I noticed that the first 5 vehicles that are listed as category 1 to be relocated are indicated as having been relocated in 2019? Do you have any indication that that occurred?
Yes, the San Bernardino, in our prior discussions and meetings, they kept updating their tables with the latest status of their vehicle. And many of them, they already indicated to us in prior meetings that they have moved them out of the district, and they'll probably definitely should be able to comply with the provision in exemption provisions under the F10 to keep them outside the district for more than 6 months every year.
Thank you. Board members, any other questions for Mr. Cho? Okay, thank you, Mr. Cho. Ms. Roberts, do you have any other witnesses that you wish to present?
No.
Thank you. So, Mr. Lindsay, I saw that you took the oath. Do you wish to testify or just present witnesses?
I don't have any testimony or witnesses to present. I would like to answer the GPS question, if I might. The question was, how will we verify GPS versus the boundary? The GPS product we use uses lat and longitude, so we will be able to use that as well as Google Maps and things like that to be able to determine exactly where each piece of equipment is every day, and it breaks it down by the hour. So we will be able to demonstrate that we've kept these vehicles out of the district for more than 180 days. And that's all I have.
Okay.
I have a follow-up on that, Ms. Bruzak.
Okay, because I was going to ask Ms. Roberts if you had any questions before I.
Oh, okay, sorry.
If I may have just a couple of very brief questions. Mr. Lindsay, I did want to try and address some of the board's questions, particularly with respect to paragraph number 13 on page number 3 of that finding and decision. Do you have that pulled up? Oh, I believe you're on mute, Mr. Lindsay.
Yes, I do have it in front of me.
Okay, so what it states there is that the county's annual budget, and it's looking at fiscal year 2019-2020, that budget has already been adopted by the county, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Prior to the entering of this order for abatement. And in fact, it was prior to when the district actually filed its petition for an order for abatement, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then it does state that the fleet management department has a capital expenditures appropriation that for that fiscal year is 5.3 million. Is that correct?
Yes, that is.
And is that capital expenditures appropriation, is that solely about replacing vehicles?
Vehicles and equipment.
Okay. So in terms of an appropriation by the county, which obviously has its own public budgeting process, the commitment has been to fund the fleet management department specifically with a capital expenditure budget of 5.3 million thus far. So is it your testimony that the capital expenditure budget of the fleet management department is sufficient between 2021, 2023, to the best of your knowledge, obviously 2023 hasn't been adopted, that you could replace these vehicles on the schedule that has been listed?
Yes. Now, with what's going on in the world, as we all know, budgets may change. But in the case of these particular vehicles, we've made the commitment that no matter what the budget is, we have made the commitment to replace these vehicles. In fact, the vehicles that will be replaced in 2021, that money's already been budgeted and is already encumbered, if you will, for those purchases. So the only vehicles that might be somewhat in question are the 2023. And if you look at those in truck terms, those are relatively inexpensive. So we've made the commitment that we will set aside that money even if budgets really crater, because we know it's really important to get those replaced and get them into compliance.
Great, thank you. That's all my questions for Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you. Mr. Balagopalan, you had a question.
Yes, Mr. Lindsay. I think you're muted, but Mr. Lindsay, my question is, are the vehicles now fitted with GPS on them?
Most of them are. We're in the process of obtaining, fitting the last couple of them with GPS, but they'll all be equipped in time to meet the first reporting period, which is the beginning of next year.
So when was the first one installed?
We've had GPS on heavy equipment. We did not install them for this. We've had that in operation for several years now.
So you can produce for the last 6 months, beginning of this year, where each vehicle was, whether they were in and out of the district boundary?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and then subsequently, now when they are out of the district, are they at where do you store them? As a maintenance yard or someplace outside the district where you store them, or do employees take them home in some cases?
Now, keep in mind, these are heavy equipment. They're big trucks or big specialty equipment, so they don't get taken home. And keep in mind that San Bernardino County is 20,000 square miles. So we have maintenance facilities and flood control yards and things like that scattered throughout the county. The majority of our county is outside the district. So they'll be redeployed in all kinds of places all over the county, but they will be outside of the district.
Okay, thank you. The last question. So you mentioned about the boundary, and right now it's not a physical boundary, as you're aware, correct? The AQMD jurisdiction. So the only way to find out if it's in and out is by mapping it.
Correct.
And so is that something you're doing with your GIS department, or you mentioned Google, but I'm just wondering who's doing that and how you know when you're in and out, or notify the driver if there's an issue.
The board, or excuse me, the district boundary is laid out if you look at it on a map, and we can map through that through GIS and through the GPS. So I don't think that's going to present an issue of determining where it's at and you know when it's in the district and when it's outside the district. I think it'll be pretty clear by looking at the GPS reports.
Okay, just like, are this GPS fitted so the data is going to the cloud where somebody can view it, or is it something you have to download it periodically?
It's in the cloud for us to view, but for reporting purposes, we will be supplying reports out of that. And it will be a significant amount of data. If you want to look at 365 days worth of GPS tracking, it will be a significant amount of data times 17 vehicles.
19, yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
Ms. Verdugo-Peralta, you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Lindsay, you had mentioned that the 5.3 million was not just for vehicles, but it was also for the equipment. Does that include the refueling stations, for instance, the CNG? And are those stations strictly for San Bernardino, or are they also public stations that are shared with other entities as well as the public that has CNG vehicles?
No, this bucket of money, if you will, the 5.3, that's strictly for vehicles. And when I say equipment, it's things like trailers, forklifts, things like that. Not stationary, not fueling stations. That's a totally different animal.
So will you be requiring monies for the refueling stations? Where are you going to refuel these vehicles? I know that the square mile, it's enormous. So where will these refueling stations be?
Are you asking about compressed natural gas fueling stations?
Yes.
We
Are
already.
You going to utilize the ones that are existing? Are you do you have ones that are solely for San Bernardino vehicles?
We have one in San Bernardino at our main yard. We have compressed natural gas fueling capabilities. And then we also utilize our partners at cities and school districts, things like that, to fuel vehicles.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Lindsay? Okay, and Mr. Lindsay, you don't wish to introduce anyone else?
No, ma'am.
And board members, would you have any other questions before we moved into deliberations and closing, etc.? Okay, thank you. Then I'm looking on the list. I don't think I see anyone that we do not recognize as either part of the parties or the district or the board, but I'm just going to ask if there's any member of the public who does wish to be heard today And if so, if you can indicate either by raising your hand or otherwise indicating to the chair. And I see none. So Ms. Roberts, if you'd like to begin with your closing.
Thank you. This is a fairly, all things considered, straightforward matter that has come before the board. The facts are fairly laid out, and that is a result of cooperation that has been between the respondent and the district staff for going on 2+ years now. And that has allowed us to get to this point that does lay out a longer term schedule, but a schedule that does result in meaningful improvement by replacing older diesel vehicles with new alternative fueled compressed natural gas vehicles on a reasonable timescale, all things considered under this rule. I do want to acknowledge briefly that the district does acknowledge that its own enforcement of its fleet rules, including Rule 1196, can stand to be improved. And part of what this board is hearing this morning, bringing these as orders for abatement, which is a relatively newer process for the district, is part of a recognition by the district that these do need to be more public, that we do need to step up, improve, and overall better our enforcement of these rules. And this process is a part and parcel of getting that improvement. And we do recognize that and are working towards that. And the entry of this order as stipulated to by the parties is reasonable, and there is good cause to enter it as stipulated to by the parties today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, do you wish to give a closing statement?
I have no closing statement. Thank you.
Okay. Board members, would anybody like to begin discussions about good cause? Mr. Balagopalan, would you like to begin?
Yeah, I think we can find good cause in this matter. I think the respondent has acted once Mr. Lindsay and Ms. Finwall came on board in 2018. They did the audit and found out they were out of compliance and took action to come into compliance. I want to remind the board we actually had another case also from the San Bernardino, but it was the city of San Bernardino sometime late last year on a similar, on the same rule, and the expenditure that was involved in coming into compliance. So it's structured very, I think, similar to come into compliance with a lead time, take into consideration the budget constraints and some of the vehicles are new. But what was different from this case was that they're going to relocate a majority of them out of the district. And from Mr. Lindsay's comments, looks like they are able to track them and able to provide a report starting early next year to the district showing whether they were in or out of the district for 180 days. So I think if they meet that requirement, about 19 vehicles basically will be in compliance. So then they have a schedule phased in for the other vehicles to replace them. So I think they're moving in the right direction to come into compliance. The emissions during the duration, I think, was also mentioned. So it's not minimal, but nevertheless, I think they do have some of the newer fleet which are cleaner engines. So that's why it's not as high. So it was 0.56 tons of NOx and 0.008 tons of particulate matter for the duration of the variant, which ends in 2024. So I think based on all the conditions that have been laid out and they're stipulated to comply with the conditions, I think we can find good cause to grant this stipulated order abatement.
I agree. Few things I wanted to say. First of all, looking at the attachment A to the order and looking at the replacement schedule. Well, first of all, starting with category 1, those vehicles that should be stored outside of the district. I'm not one for liking to just move around pollution. However, we are the most polluted district, and that's why we have the most stringent rules, and we have fleet rules and others do not. But I do think that's happening very quickly. We heard or we see that some of these have already been moved and the others will be moved by the end of this year. And so it won't be coming into they won't be coming into the district that often, which is good and fall within the exemption. As for the replacement schedule in category 2, I do like the fact that the 3 vehicles that were purchased in the early or mid 2000s, 2006, those 3 are the first to be replaced, and they will be replaced, 2 of them by the first half of next year and the 3rd by the second half of next year. And then the 2 that remain, so this is a longer term order, but it's important to note for the record that the 2 that remain longer term, one's a 2015, they're both 2015 vehicles. So they're relatively cleaner. And they do contain those DPFs, I believe. So, so for those reasons, I think the schedule is fine, and there's good cause for that. And I do also want to just note that I appreciate what Ms. Roberts said about enforcement in your closing. And I agree wholeheartedly with Ms. Verdugo Peralta, who worked very hard while on the governing board to get these fleet rules passed. And I worked hard as well as part of the fight to keep them. And the point is to have those public fleets that still remain under the rules to take the lead and help to really bring these alternative fuel vehicles into the mainstream more. So I think we appreciate seeing that happen. So for all those reasons, I find good cause. Anyone else have any thoughts? Ms. Verdugo Peralta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Ms. Roberts for making that comment because it is very concerning and kind of disheartening that it's still taking this long for better oversight and compliance of the fleet rules to be occurring. Be that as it may, it's happening. So I'm glad to hear that. I also commend the County of San Bernardino for being so proactive and putting together this this document that we see here that lists all of the vehicles that they are going to be working with and trying to come into compliance. I recognize the fact that these are heavy duty vehicles, very expensive, and that they have to take that into account when they're purchasing them and how long they're going to be in service. For all of those reasons, I do also find good cause. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts before we make a motion? Okay. Mr. Balagopalan, did you wish to make a motion?
Yes, I can.
Oh, sorry.
If I may,
Oh.
so sorry, but on page 5, condition number 4, the parties stipulated to a status hearing at the board's discretion as to.
Thank you for reminding me that. And I wanted to raise that. I'm glad you reminded me. I was thinking, board members, that July of 2021 would be a good time for our next status conference. It's a year from now. This is a longer term order. And by that time, 2 of the vehicles of the 5 will have needed to have been replaced by that time. And also all of the vehicles in category 1 will have to have been relocated, and there should be some GPS data by that time. Does that make sense to my fellow board members? And I will ask, no, I don't know. Madam Clerk, do you have a 2021 calendar in front of you?
Let's see. I do.
Let's see.
And 2020 July, what day did you want?
Well, that's what I was going to look at. What dates in, let's say, it's the 7th. So maybe that first week of July, the 6th, 7th, or 8th, I believe. Those are Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in 2021.
That is correct.
Okay. Shall we go with the Wednesday of July 7th, and we can make it exactly a year? And is that okay with the parties before we add that to the stipulated order?
That's fine with the district. Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay, I see you nodding.
That's fine with the county. Thank you.
Okay, board members, anyone have any thoughts on that date other than that that's a good date? Okay. Mr. Balagopalan, now I believe we may make a motion.
Okay, so in the matter of the County of San Bernardino case number 6174-1, I move that we find good cause to proceed to grant the stipulated order abatement as per and with the conditions listed in attachment 1 with the addition of the date as it was just discussed in item number 4 of the order that the respondent will come back before the hearing board on July 7, 2021.
You mean exhibit 1?
Huh?
You said
In
attachment.
exhibit 1. Oh, yes, exhibit 1.
I second the motion if Mr. Balakapon is done.
Thank you, Ms.
with the
Verdugo.
motion.
Any discussion on the motion, board members? Okay, I vote yes. Dr. Bernstein, how do you vote?
Aye.
Senator Holden, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Verdugo Peralta, you vote.
Aye.
And Mr. Balagopalan, you vote.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you for excellently prepared case and papers and presentation. Any other business board members before we adjourn? Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I just want to clarify, the next hearing is scheduled for the 15th.
Actually,
15th, I think.
it is the 14th.
14th.
A matter that's scheduled for July 14th. The matter that was on July 15th has since come off calendar.
Thank you for that.
Okay, so maybe I don't have an updated board schedule. So what hearing is on the 14th?
It's going to be a short variance for Tesoro. And I believe that they intend to put it on consent calendar, so you should be getting some documents very soon.
Okay, we'll get some documents regarding that. I just want to make sure. Okay, thank you.
I'm glad that was mentioned. So board members, all please look out for those consent documents. I'll be timely in our response. Any other?
Congratulations, Julie and Mohan.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations.
Ditto.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other business before we adjourn? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you all.
Take care, everybody.
All right.
Same to all.